All right, one more minute, and then we'll get started as we get a few more folks started. Okay, cool. I think we're at 10:02. We have a bunch of folks here, so let's go ahead and get started with the agenda. So to recap, three priorities for the Farcaster protocol team. One is permissionless hubs, getting to a point where anyone can click a button, run a hub, and have it work and sync all the messages on the network. Two is permissionless signups. So any application on behalf of any user can sign them up and get them to join the network and start casting messages. And three is new features. So whatever cycles we have left, we're going to devote to new features that keep improving hubs and improving clients. And we'll cover these in this order, talking about what's specifically coming in this release and what's coming in future releases. So first, on the permissionless hubs side of things, the primary thing we're focusing on is developer experience. So Shane's been working on a new package deployment system. We experimented with doing Docker since we last had this meeting. Docker turned out to actually be quite finicky in a lot of cases, and so we're going for something a lot simpler that's easier to just get up on any Unix-like environment. There's two known issues, one with occasional stalls that we've got one report of that Sanjay's debugging, and one with a running out of space issue that another user has reported. So we're going to continue looking into these. If you've run into either of these issues, or if you've run into other issues while running hubs, please let us know. We want to make sure we're barreling down and fixing all of these as they come up to make hubs super stable. Cool. Any questions on that? Great. Second thing, and this is the big update this time, is we have the links FIP, which Cassie has been working on, which is going to go out in this release. So as a reminder, links, I'll just open up this design doc here. Links are the feature that allow users to establish relationships with other users. So they support follows, kind of your canonical follows in social networks, but they're also freeform and they allow you to define other types of relationships. So you can call it an endorse, and you can call it, you can establish different kinds of relationships between users. There's no formal schema for this now. You can literally put in whatever string you want. But over time, we might actually standardize on a schema here and have different names and types that applications can interpret in shared ways. There's also an extensible version of this, which hasn't been implemented yet, which would allow you to follow a smart contract or a web page or an entity, where we can launch this in a future version. We kept the scope low so we could get something out in this release, and then we can iterate on this as we go. So the way the release is going to work, and this is enumerated here, is it's going to ship in the new hub version. So a new version of hub is going to go out on May 31st. Everyone's going to run them. This new version will have APIs to accept and return link messages, but they will not work for 2 weeks. And the reason for this is we want to make sure all the other hubs are shut down, since this is a non-backwards compatible change. So the hubs will go live, and then exactly at midnight UTC, when the old hubs shut down, the new hubs will start accepting link messages, and so anyone can broadcast and request link messages. So that's the rough plan for how this is going to get released. Warpcast will, at some point after the June 14th date, start pushing its follows into the network, so developers will be able to pull messages for this. Don't have an exact timeline on that yet. We'll announce that in the channels as we get closer to it, but expect us to follow soon after that release with pushing data, and this should be pretty open to everyone to use. Cool. Any questions on links, the rollout plan, any concerns? This is going to be the last chance for feedback, by the way. I think after this, we're going to move the spec to finalized, and it's going to be out there soon. Great. If anyone has concerns, feel free to DM on Telegram after this or post in chat, but links are going to be out very soon. Two other updates. So we pushed canonical serialization for hashing messages. As a recap, this was the issue where because of the way protobufs work, using different languages or different libraries in the same language would sometimes result in messages that were incompatible. So the same message would produce different hashes, which is obviously a pain. So right now you can only use TS Proto, which makes it really annoying to implement hubs in other languages. It's possible, it's just really annoying. Sanjay explored this approach of using sort of storing the byte stream along with the messages, which we thought was promising. Unfortunately, it's turned out to be a lot more complicated. And we decided to take another path, which was actually to define a canonical serialization scheme. However, that's a lot more work and not something we're going to be able to actually get out this release. So you can click into this, and there's a lot of commentary on the different paths and how we're thinking about this. This is going to be a lot more work, so expect it to come down the line in a future release, which should make it easier to write hub clients in other languages. Again, it's still possible. Someone's done it in Python and it works correctly, but this will just make it a lot easier for everyone to do this going forward. The fourth one is multi-signatures. So this was the notion that when user migrates their content from one address to another address, there's going to be a very easy way to preserve all their content, versus the current system would require all the messages to get deleted from hubs, applications to store a copy, and then rebroadcast it after the transfer has been completed. Multi-signatures also ended up taking us a little longer than we wanted to, so we're going to push them out to the next release, just because we didn't get them done in time to have them thoroughly tested on testnet hubs. Cool. That's what we've got on deck for the permissionless hub side of things. I'm going to move on to permissionless signups and talk about this. And this is kind of the big sort of idea space. So we, at a high level, we're targeting getting to permissionless by Q3 or Q4 at the latest. There's three main differences in terms of how we're going to do onboarding between how it works today and how it will work in the future. The first thing is we're going to move to off-chain ENS names. So F names today, you register them on-chain. We're going to move them off-chain and have them work in an ENS compatible way using the off-chain naming system, which means they cost no gas and they're going to be free. So there's going to be a centralized server that runs somewhere in the cloud that will be resolving all of these names. The second thing is we actually want to move the FID registration to an L2 to reduce costs. Ongoing discussions on which L2 is the right L2. We're exploring kind of everything and expect a doc from me at some point in the next few weeks outlining the different L2s and which one we've decided on. It may take us a few months to actually get to the decision, but we'll actually have the high-level trade-offs in place. Just to give folks a preview of how we're thinking about it, I think the networks that we've looked at are Optimism, Arbitrum, Starknet, zk-Sync, Polygon's zk-AVM. It's still early, but just as a preview, I think the two that we are less excited about now are probably Starknet and zk-Sync, mostly because Starknet is a very different, like non-EVM compatible model, and zk-Sync is also like a little harder to work with today. So it seems more likely that we'll end up on one of the highly EVM compatible chains, but as to which one, we're still discussing. Cool. The third thing that we want is to allow flexible storage for users. So we recognize that users may care about different levels of storage. Some users may want to acquire more storage for their content and less storage. So we're actually going to come up with a system that during signup and anytime after signup allows users to pay more to store more of their content on the network. So right now, everyone kind of has the same 10,000 message limit. And there's going to be some default number that everyone gets in the future. But if you want more storage, you have to pay, and you can pay as much as you want for as many units of storage as you want. So it's a highly flexible system, and we'll cover that in a little more detail. So I made a little Excalibur diagram here to cover how the contracts work today and how they'll work in the future. So today you have a single user. They register an FID, they get this number like 123, and they register an F name, and they get a name like Adfarun, which works on Ethereum L1. The way we want the system to work when all of these three pieces are done is going to look a little more like this. You're going to make a transaction to an ETH L2, where you will acquire an FID, so that's going to happen here, and then you'll acquire some amount of storage. By default, you have to acquire at least 1 unit of storage from the storage contracts. And over time, you'll have to acquire, you can choose to acquire more storage from the storage contracts as well. The second thing that you'll do is you'll make an off-chain request to a name server. So you'll get sort of a @farcaster.xyz name that you can then register. And that's done completely off-chain, and so costs nothing. This server will be in communication with the hubs. So hubs will actually collect all of this data. And from the app developer's perspective, you can still continue querying the hubs for the names of a user, and it'll tell you what you want. You'll only have to interact with the server when you want to sign up a new user. And this is going to be an open source server. Anyone can talk to the server. You just need a signed message from the user. So any application will be able to interact with the server and request a new F name as long as the user has a registered FID on chain. And the way we're thinking about name systems, so we sort of want this to be, the main goal with the name system was we wanted it to be free and easy for all users when they sign up, right? We don't want to tell users, hey, you need to go buy an ENS name on L1, which can be very expensive. So by default, every user at sign up, at least in Warpcast, is going to be prompted to register their free username at farcaster.xyz. They're going to get it. They're going to set it up. This is a moderated namespace, so the rules are exactly the same as what we have today, 16 characters. Impersonation is strictly discouraged. We have an admin control that we can use to revoke names, et cetera, et cetera. And if you want a truly decentralized name, you can upgrade by connecting your ENS name or acquiring a new ENS name if you like, and they will be supported as first-class names as well, in at least in the Warpcast ecosystem. So you can type in, at @vern.eth, it will resolve down to the FID. You can type @vern and Farcaster, it will resolve down to the FID. So this gives users a great degree of flex. It makes onboarding super easy, but the users who really care about decentralized and owned names have the ability to upgrade to that name system at any point and use that. So fully compatible with ENS. On the ecosystem. Cool. I see some questions in chat that I'm going to answer soon, but before I get to that, anyone have any other questions about the system that they want to bring up? Cool. David has a question of pay for storage of non-cast as well like reactions that otherwise expire or no. David, I'm not sure if you follow this.
My bad. Basically what I meant was that, there's a bit of an echo. Yeah, there you go. There was a talk about paying for extra storage for storing more than 10,000 casts. Reactions are set to expire. Is there a way to pay to prevent them from expiring and pay for the storage? Like if you want, let's say, algorithms to be trained on more of your preferences, then reactions might actually be a useful long-term signal to like, hey, I actually want more of these stored so that my tools are better at understanding my interests.
Yeah, so the way we'll probably do this is have a simple storage slot system where like you buy 1 unit of storage and it actually gives you a certain number of casts, reactions, and follows. And to start with, we're not going to have a ton of customizability. It's going to be like 1 slot gives you, X, Y, and Z of each of them. And if you want more, you can buy 2 or 3 or 4 slots, and that gives you like an increasing amount of storage on the network. The other thing, the other way to think about storage is almost like a liveness guarantee for application developers. And the thing is, like, you can always archive content, right? So you as an app developer can keep archiving this content and use it for offline analysis of a user's data and history. What storage gives you is liveness, which says that, hey, every hub will have this data, and you as the user have the ability to easily delete that data or revoke that, which is actually important to users at any time. So apps who care about like, hey, I want to understand all the past reactions, you can kind of archive it and dump it into some data store and keep using that for your own purposes.
Yeah, I guess the benefit of having it on the hub is that a new app that I might start using may not have my historical data. So it's actually valuable for like interoperability and like propagating across different applications.
Yep, exactly. And that's why the liveness piece is very important. And so if you want live data, you have to purchase the storage slots. If you're okay with interpreting all data and use an application or like, hey, I've already got these users, I want to keep analyzing them, you can have data for archival purposes. And I wouldn't be surprised if over time there's a marketplace for archival data where people can go and buy and analyze this stuff. I do expect that right now, the cost of storage is probably going to be reasonably low because we have a small number of users. We'll come back to you with like what that number is. And B, most users will purchase enough storage to store like years or multiple years worth of data. So right now, I think it'll be very expensive. It's mostly a question of as the network grows and we get lots and lots of content, there'll be a natural clearing price for the storage that emerges, which makes it more expensive over time. Cool. Any other questions on this? I know this is a lot of stuff, so I want to make sure people have a chance to digest and really understand this before we move forward. Okay, great. Sounds like everyone's on board. Again, we'll probably have like multiple FIPs on this. So the way we're thinking about implementing this is in the next release. So the one after the next. So the next one is on 5/31, which will have links. The one on 7/14, which will release in the middle, will probably have off-chain ENS names integrated. Which will allow us to then say, hey, we've now moved all the names from this contract to this off-chain registry. And so it's silent change that's happening. Only Warpcast should be affected by this because I don't think anyone else is interacting directly with the contract. So it's hopefully a silent change that just happens in the background. Users will probably notice no material impact as a result of this. And then the second piece, which we'll do for the following release, which we're targeting early September, will be the, hey, let's actually move to an L2. So the contracts are actually migrated over to an L2, and we actually have the storage system implemented, which will also be a contract on L2 that you can call. And that will actually allow fully permissionless onboarding. And we plan to have the contracts ready, do a testnet deployment, do a full migration, and then do a mainnet L2 deployment and do another migration. So there's once we're code complete, which I actually expect will be pretty fast, we might even be code complete in June or July. We just have a process of testing and migrating, which I think will take a couple of months, and then we'll be all on the mainnet and permissionless. A couple of features I wanted to talk about. So one feature that we're adding, and this kind of ties into the off-chain ENS names, is support for on-chain ENS names. So these are all the L1 ENS names like @varun.eth and @varunsurn.eth and so on. And we just want to make them fully available in the hub so you can easily read data. There's an FIP we shared earlier, and we're trying to land that along with the off-chain ENS name, so you have both of those features at the same time. Users will get the off-chain one by default, and then they can upgrade to the on-chain one. And from the hub's perspective, it's like you give it an ENS name, it'll tell you who that user is. Or you give it an FID, it'll tell you what ENS name is associated with that. And it has a system where if a user owns multiple names, they can specify what their current primary name is, and that will be the one that's returned for all of their messages. So making it as easy as possible for app developers to render all this data. Cool. Any questions on that?
Yeah, question on the so moving names to off-chain. Is that moving like new registrations to be off-chain, or is it migrating existing names to then become off-chain ENS names? I'm not sure I follow the like moving part there.
So basically all existing names today. So if you have, let's say @Greg or @GScrollOff on Farcaster, it's on an L1 Gurley contract that's actually chunked somewhere. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all of those and actually make them off-chain ENS names. So if you add @Greg, it's going to be @Greg.Farcaster.xyz, and then all new registrations will also occur that way.
Cool. So F names move from an on-chain registry to off-chain ENS.
Yeah, exactly. So all F names are now just, an F name is effectively an ENS name that's, name.farcaster.xyz.
Cool. Thanks.
And then that actually gives us some nice properties in the future where now you have a de facto domain that is yours and your identities. And this farcaster.xyz server might even let you specify which client you want it to point to. So you can say like, hey, I'd like it to go to the Jam page for my account, or I'd like it to go to the Discover page or my Workcast page. That's not in the V1, but it's something that we might build into that over time. It's like a redirect for your account. Dan, anything you want to add on that? Are you muted, by the way? Can't hear you yet. No. Okay. We'll see where this goes. All right. The other one that we wanted to talk about was channels. So this is not a new hub feature, but it's something new that Warpcast is doing, and so we wanted to highlight it and give developers a preview. So first, what is a channel? So FIP2 added the ability for any cast or reaction to point to an object that's not necessarily another cast. So you can have a cast that is a reply to a cast, you can have a cast that is a reply to a website, or you can have a cast that is a reply to a smart contract. And we're calling these three things the sort of like, what are you replying to? The notion of a channel, which is to say, hey, you're now putting this cast or this reaction in a channel, and applications can start doing interesting things and inferring context from that. So as an example, let's say you respond to the ENS governance contract. You're now having a conversation about ENS governance that is very, very specific to that. And so the way we think applications should think about this is like, A, you might want to create a separate space where someone who's interested in all ENS governance conversations can click on that and go read just the conversations of that. B, this actually provides a lot of contextual data that's useful for applications, which is you probably don't want to always put something that's in a channel in the main feed. But for example, if you know that Greg and I follow each other, we both care about ENS, we both have an ENS name, you might actually say, hey, when Varun posts something in the ENS channel, also surface it to Greg in their feed because it's actually relevant to Greg because of Greg's interest. So it allows for like more contextual connection of pieces between users and not necessarily always broadcast this out there for user. So again, this is all enabled by the protocol by FIP2. All this is simply you just specify the channel or the reply target, as we used to call it, in the cast, and it goes into that channel, and applications can do whatever they want with it. But what we did want to cover is how Warpcast in particular is thinking about implementing the first version of this feature. So today, if you do a cast in a channel, it just shows up on your profile page. Doesn't go into your feed, just ends up on your profile. What we're going to start doing is if you cast something in the purple channel, and doing that in the purple channel is simply, you just reply to this chain :/ URL, which is the URL, the URI of the contract on the blockchain. Then it will automatically go into a special purple feed, which will show up on your application if you're a part of the Purple DAO, and you can see this and you'll get new notifications when there's stuff there. So it's very simple. It's just a reply to the governance contract, ends up going into a separate feed. We're only going to start by supporting the purple channel on day one, just to experiment with like how this works and what the UI feels like and what people like. And I think it'll be a good place for the governance conversations to happen. And when you compose, like if you're in this feed and you hit compose, you'll actually see sort of a casting in purple. So by default, your tags are kind of, your casts are kind of tagged in that channel. And when you're casting from the main feed, you will just sort of cast in the main feed. Over time, Warpcast wants to support many, many more channels, but we want to experiment with this narrow version first, understand the patterns, see what the usage is, and then expand this over time. Cool. Any questions?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so two things. One,
Dan, your voice is like clipping. It's like super loud.
damn it. Boomer mic issues.
Yeah.
All right.
If you talk really softly, if you whisper, I think it works fine.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So two things here. One, all of the cast data that originates from Warpcast will be on hubs and permissionless for anyone to do whatever they want with it, right? So if you don't want to show it in feeds because you don't think purple stuff is useful, you're free to do that when you're a client. If all you want to do is show governance-oriented conversations that are tagged to here, go for it. The other thing is your client can contribute liquidity to the feed, right? So if you have a bunch of people who are talking about purple or another topic at some point when we expand this, all of those posts are going to flow through directly to Warpcast for distribution. And we will try to be clear on, we'll be trying to be generally clear on like how we treat things that are in channels versus what gets bumped to the feed. It's not going to be perfect, and we're not going to be always maintain it long term, especially if our feeds get more algorithmic. But I think for the foreseeable future, giving a simple kind of like, this is what stuff ends up in channels, and then this is the kind of stuff that ends up bumping to feeds. I think to what Varun said is we're going to try to make sure it's relevant to people based on mutual interests. And so I think this becomes a really powerful primitive, is that there can be folks who really want to focus on specific topics, and then other people who want actually kind of a broader swath of activity, and it can play really nicely, and all of the liquidity is shared, which I think is pretty cool, right? It's not creating another silo. It's actually adding more liquidity to the overall protocol.
Yep. Any questions from folks on this? The big thing that we want to make sure is that like other app developers feel like they can support similar patterns and things in their UI. Like we want to make sure this is compatible, this shows up nicely, and that you can add these features over time as it makes sense.
Yeah, so it's a question about this. So for cats to show up in the channel, this cat has to reply to the purple contract. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, but then if I reply to another cast that replies to purple contract, it will also show up there.
Yeah. Any sort of descendants of that that cast or reactions there automatically get moved into this channel. It's just what is at the very highest level of the hierarchy defines the channel.
And then how do I reply to a contract on Warpcast? Are you going to have like a button that says, if
So
I'm
you
in the
can,
channel?
It's a good question. So in this version, when you go into the purple channel here and you reply, you can kind of see here it says casting in purple. So when you click on purple and then click on the cast button down here, it will automatically cast in that channel. And that's kind of going to be the initial UI to do this. Over time, as we have more channels, we'll probably have a more like picker type UI, and we'll need to iterate on this. But it's like super simple and super basic, just to make sure that like, hey, we want to test that this is useful, and we want to have a simple interaction.
Okay. And then the contract you use is the one that's listed here, right? This ERC 721.
Yes, it's the governance contract.
No, the NFT contract, you mean?
Oh, sorry, the NFT contract.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So that basically covers this. If you guys have questions offline, you can send them to me offline, or you can bring them up in this call. You can also vote for whether you want Hype Dan to return to the next call, or whether you prefer ASMR Dan. We're happy to bring whichever one you prefer. And I think that kind of brings us to the end of the meeting. Shout out to Greg for actually connecting us with the ENS folks after the last call, who helped us think through some of the design and some of the complexities there. And then a final help wanted. If you're running a hub, would love for you to check your hub, see if it's still working, see if you're running into any bugs or any issues. We'd just love to get feedback that we can use to fix issues over the next couple of weeks. And then a last note on logistics. We're going to push the Farcaster Dev Call 2 weeks from now to a different time slot, because both Dan and I will be in a different time zone that week. We're both going to be in Europe working out of there. So I will send out a new time for the next call that will be potentially slightly a little earlier to make sure it lines up. And then we'll return to our usual scheduling for the call after that. Great. And finally, sorry, I said finally last time, but finally, a plug for our Twitter Spaces this evening. It's actually going to be focused on FarCon, and we're going to have the organizers on to chat. So if you're interested, dial in and hear what's on schedule. All right. Thank you all for coming again, and talk to you all very soon.